It's Becky from powertoolswiththread.com. That's my blog. Okay, this is part 3, the final part of sewing the Dachshund Tote bag from SweetPea Embroidery Designs. I will link to parts 1 and 2 below in the description box if you want to see how to do that. This time we are just going to talk about bag construction. Let's get stitching. All right, it is time to trim the blocks. I looked in the directions and did not see anywhere that it said to trim the stabilizer next to the fabric. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave the stabilizer in the fabric, and I'm just going to go ahead and trim from the outer stitching edge, which is right there. And I'm going to put my ruler and I'm going to trim 1/2 inch away from that. And we need to do that to all the blocks. Now, I don't recommend doing it yet to the top and the bottom. And there's a reason for that. So right now, I'm just going to trim all of my sides to 1/2 inch. And when I get done, I will meet you back here and we're going to talk about attaching our blocks. Okay, when you're trying to put these pieces together, the natural inclination is to, what the instructions say, is to just line up the edges and put them together and sew 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch seam allowance, or just right inside on here, and they should come out. The odds of that happening are low. So I cheat and I glue. And I glue with Steam-A-Seam too. So what I'm going to do, you have to figure out which panel is going to go where, all right? And I know that, so there's the center panel on the purse, and then there's the body, and then this one is going to go over here. So on this one, I'm going to leave this edge right here flat. And since I want this to go attach right here, what I'm going to do, this stitch line right here, see that stitch line, right? You want to fold that stitch line so that you want to fold it back, and then you want to iron it. Pin it if you have to. I'm going to get a couple pins. Okay, fold it back. Don't stick yourself. Right? Did I stick myself? Not too bad. Don't get blood on your project. Well, I'm bleeding. Look at that. Happens. Okay, when you have this folded back all the way like this, look at it from the front. You do not want to be able to see that little stitch line right there. You want that stitch line folded over as good as you can, so that when you look at it from the front, you can't see it. My fabric's coming out of my stitching line a little bit. And iron that edge down. See how you cannot see that stitching line? There's the stitch line right there. Okay? You can see it better on the pink than the white, but you cannot see it from the front. If your pins have plastic heads that can melt, be mindful of that when you do your pressing. Usually I would use glass head pins on this. Okay, so now that end is pressed, I can remove my pins. And I cannot see the stitching from this side. If you get a little bit of fraying here, don't worry about that. We're going to sew and capture that in the seam allowance. But what you want to do now is take your Steam-A-Seam and you want to just make a piece of it and run it right next to the stitch line on the piece that you're going to glue it to. Like, let me get this up close so you can see. The Steam-A-Seam is just barely over that white stitching line right there. And I'm going to peel it off. Now what you want to do is marry up the stitch lines exactly matching the body, okay? Your top and bottom may not match, and that's okay. That's the reason we glue first, because these matching up are more important than these matching up. I'm going to pin them again. Yep, that looks good. And now we're going to iron it. Hit it with a shot of steam. So it's kind of tacked in place now. Now open this up and don't let it shift. And hit it again. This is perfect. Now you can fold this back over. You can pin it if it makes you happy. I recommend sewing right. It's hard to tell because this is white. You've got an inner stitching line and an outer stitching line on these, and when you are going over these seams where you've got your heavy satin stitching, I recommend sewing right between those two lines that you can see. And this is how it came out. I think that that will work. So I'm going to continue to put the rest of the bag together just like that. Now it tells you to open your seams up and iron them flat. You can do that. You've got steam-a-seam. If you did it this method, you've got steam-a-seam in there. So I'm just going to open it up a little bit. And not down the center, but so the steam-a-seam part is glued together, and there's the other piece of the stabilizer. And it still looks great. So that's still together. Now, I'm going to do the same thing here. And you just, again, you want to make sure that line of stitching cannot be seen. I think you can see this here. Can you see these two lines of stitching right here? Okay, when you're sewing over those satin seams, you want to stitch in between those two lines of stitching. So I am going to fold this back to hide that sewn edge. It's okay if it's, you know, 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch shorter than you anticipated. The trick is not to see the seams, the sewing lines. You don't want to see the sewing lines. So now that that's covered, I can just barely glue it right over. And that line now is completely hidden. I don't have to worry about it showing up. All right, that came out absolutely perfect. You cannot see the seam at all, the stitching at all. Time to do the other side. So you can not iron this stuff. It can move around a little bit if it's not ironed, so it's completely up to you. The instructions say iron if desired. It's completely up to you. I'm going to put this right over it. All right, now for both of these pieces, I'm going to go sew right in between those two little stitching lines right there. Okay. All together. That looks good. Now we are ready to trim the top and use put the borders on. Okay, now that we've got all of the pieces together, the blocks are together, I'm going to trim these blocks to the 1/2 inch outside of that bottom edge of stitching. So this is where you're going to get your measurement for how long your border pieces need to be. So again, if you had put more body pieces on, your border pieces would be longer.
You can share a picture there
Whoop.
with you.
That's Pat Sloan. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to do this to both of these panels, and I want to make sure to get them the same length so they're not wonky. It looks like they're going to come out to be the same length. That looks pretty good, see? Okay. Now the panels, the blocks themselves have batting under them. That was, if you recall, that was the first tack down that was done. Let's see, I'm trying to talk and measure at the same time and it slows me down. So the batting was the first tack down stitch for the blocks. So that means that the borders, what they call the borders, that's the top and bottom of the bag, also need batting. I'm going to use fusible fleece if I have enough of it. I may not have enough of it. Oh, that might be close. I'm sure I've got more around here somewhere. Fusible fleece is great because it's the same, this, in my case, it's the same loft as my my blocks. You're going to want to have some batting that is the same loft as your blocks. So, I mean, it could be puffier, but this is not fusible on this side, but it has glue bumps on this side. So this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to go ahead and adhere the fabric to this. Okay, so I have backed my fabric with fusible fleece, ironed it on so one side's not sticky. This is a Pellon product. I really like it. And I'm just going to stitch it on both sides, all 4 pieces. And when you stitch these, I recommend, because you're stitching blind, that once again, when you put it on like this, you're going to stitch it from the back side and go right in between those 2 rows of stitching right there. And that way you will capture your outer stitching line and you won't be able to see it. Okay? So I'm going to go do that. So once you have your borders sewn on, then I'm just going to turn them upside down. And the pattern gives you, like on this one, they wanted me to cut 23. Well, this is only 16. 23 would have been way too long. And so I just made these just a little bit longer than what my actual size was of my panels, of my blocks. And I'm just going to trim them up even now and then go press them open and press the seams flat on each side. And then I'm going to create the box bottom. Okay, so now I have both of these on and the seams are pressed open. Now, they have you like cut a square out. I don't do that. When you stitch these, you want to make sure that you nest right here on this seam. Well, not necessarily nest. You really can't. I mean, unless you wanted to push this up and push this down and then push them together and get a perfect nest. That's a lot of bulk. I don't know. But you do need to make sure that these seams are together and these seams are together. And then again, sew right in between those 2 lines of stitching. So you can see here, when you sew in between the 2 lines of stitching, you catch it and you cannot see it from the outside. That's just a little trick to putting these kind of things together. Okay. I'm also going to cut a lining, 2 pieces of lining, the same size as the bag. So I have sewn the 2 side seams on here, and I wanted to show you it is more important to get this to match at this point than it is to get the top edges to match. And just like on the bottom, you want this to match. And then this can be evened up later. This is all, so don't, when you sew, don't sew down, around, and up. You want to sew your 2 side seams first, and then you can even out the bottom. This is just an easy way to do this, because this is all very subjective. By the time you get to this point, So now I'm lining up these edges on my ruler like this, making sure that it's straight. And now I will go and sew this 1/2 inch seam allowance here. Same with this, okay? So I'm going to measure from here over on this center seam. I want to get as close to the edge as I can. I want this straight. I think that that will work right there. Okay. It doesn't matter that that's not perfect like that, but now they're the same. See? And my edges match. Oh, I'm 1 stitch off there. Don't look. Okay. But everything else on it's great. So now I'm going to go sew the bottom closed, and then I'm going to box it. So I am putting the bottom together, make sure it's the bottom, and opening up the seams, and I can feel that they are matched. They want you to cut 2 inches, and so we'll do that. I'll come down to the point of the bag, and it doesn't matter so long as they are the same. I make sure I've got a straight ruler line on that seam line right there, and that way I know it's a straight box. One of the things I wanted to show you guys, this is called a totally tubular pressing station from Designs and Machine Embroidery, and it comes with different size pieces that you can remove these like this, and you can put, like, if you need a skinny one to get inside of a little part of a bag, like an inner pocket. It's like a sleeve board, but where a sleeve board is rounded, this one is squared. It's got points that can get into those little parts for, your bottom of your bags. And then it also comes with wool pressing mats that go on and fit. They have these. You just, depending on which side you have standing up, then, if you have a larger bag, you could use this one. I really like this medium-sized arm right here. So, I mean, look how flat I got this, and it was so easy to do. So I'm just going to put that on there, and then I can get this corner now right up to the edge on that wooden block, and it works just perfectly. And when you've got that wool pressing mat underneath, it just makes all the difference in the world to give you the flattest possible seams. I really like it. If you're a bag maker, you really want one of these. I'm going to trim my corners here. Designs and Machine Embroidery makes the coolest stuff. And now I need to get the bottom of the bag pressed. So once again, I can put it over and get this on and get it close. This is darn near impossible on a regular ironing board. It's strong enough for you to press down with your iron. Look at that. Look how nice and that looks. Turn around, do the other side. It's all in the tools. Makes all the difference in the world. My dad used to say, right tool for the job. The bag, already it wants to stand up nice. That just looks so, so good, doesn't it? And that's because I could get those seams nice and flat. And then look at, this is already pressed out nice and flat. This is just really a very handy tool. Okay, so now we have the bag right side out. We have the lining inside out. And you want to take your handles, and you want to take the handles wrong side out. And I'm just going to measure in 3 inches from the side seam and pin it down here. And 3 inches in from this side. Pin it. And same on the other side. I made the lining the same way the directions say to cut those corner squares out. It is a little bit easier. It allows you to see better. Either way works. I was taught the first way in the beginning of my sewing career, so kind of just do it like that. Okay, so that's good. Now what you need to do is you need to put the bag inside the lining, handles and all, and you want to stitch around the top. So you need to match up your side seams. I will, I don't have any with me here at the ironing board, but I will use clips for this, the Wonder clips. That's what I'm going to use to make that work. Okay, I have my bag all clipped. And if you've never used Wonder clips before, these are great. They're better than pins. You're not going to stick yourself. And they have, Wonder clips have a round side. There's all different sizes. Let me get a bigger one so you can see. They have a round side and a flat side. And that flat side is meant to go against the bed of your machine. It just makes it easier for everything. So I've pinned it with the round side inside of the bag and the flat side. So this will go against the bed of the machine. And when you start stitching, you want to start on a side seam. And it hides the stitching just a little bit better. Be sure you have that opening in the bottom of your lining. You don't want to have to go back and do that afterwards. And I have a 1/2 inch mark here on the bed of my machine. I'm at a 2.5 inch stitch length. I'm going to go forward a little bit and backwards a little bit. I'm going to go forward and backwards not only on the side seams but also on the handles where they connect on both sides. And just stitch it on. My handles are under this big clip. There's the end of it. I can feel it right there. Hear it too, a little bit thicker stitching. Just make sure that your handles aren't going to come off when you're not looking. Done. All right, that was easy. That's great. Okay, now you want to flip your bag through that bottom seam there. Now I'm going to want to roll the lining just a little bit so that you can't see it from the outside. And then I'm going to use Stitch Witchery to close up the bottom of the lining. I'm not going to sew it because I don't want to change my thread color, and I'm kind of lazy like that. And that'll look good. All right, so I'm going to go press this nice and flat and make it so that you cannot see the lining from the outside of the bag. And we want to go back to the machine and top stitch all of this down. Let me do the Stitch Witchery right now. So the way I'm going to iron this is so that I can see the dark purple from the inside. Those seams match perfect. Absolutely perfect. Okay, now it's time to top stitch all the way around. Make sure that lining doesn't come up at all. This looks great. Too cute, too cute. When I'm top stitching, I like to extend stitch length to 3.5. Start it right on the side seam. I'm going to try to keep the edge of the bag just inside that 1/4 inch foot. Now you want to land right on top of your stitching where you started. Back stitch. Look at that. Done. Yay, I need some scissors. I gotta cut these strings off. Okay, all finished. Oh my gosh, you guys. And look inside down there. See? Can't see it at all. Looks good. Okay, I have my little label. Becky Thompson, Power Tools with Thread, with my little sewing machine. I'm gonna stitch witchery that on as well. Look at that weenie dog. Isn't he cute? Love it. Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you for joining me on this. If you enjoyed doing this project, we've got another one coming up January 18th, 2021. We're going to make the Sweet Pea cross and Easter lily wall hanging design so you're ready for Easter. All right, you guys, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. We'll see you again soon. Go sew something. Bye.